Having children is supposed to be a hopeful decision, a promise, a future carefully planned. But sometimes, history doesn't unfold through careful planning. Sometimes it drifts, quietly, almost politely. The film you're about to hear about was never meant to predict anything. It didn't come from a laboratory of futurists or political theorists. It came from irritation, from discomfort, from standing in the wrong place at the wrong time and noticing something no one wanted to name. On the surface, it looked like a crude comedy. Loud jokes, exaggerated stupidity, a future played for laughs. But beneath that noise was a single, unsettling idea. Not about technology, not about dictators, not about machines taking over. Just people. And what happens when no one is paying attention anymore? This story doesn't begin on a film set. It doesn't begin in a studio. It begins in line. A long, slow-moving line. With parents, with children, and with a realization that refused to go away. The origin, where the idea actually started. It didn't start in a writer's room. There was no whiteboard, no pitch meeting, no clever brainstorming session. It started in a place designed for joy. A theme park, bright colors, cartoon voices, children everywhere. Mike Judge was there with his daughters, doing what millions of parents do every day, waiting, standing still, killing time in a slow-moving line. And that's when he heard it. Two mothers, not whispering, not joking, screaming profanity at their toddlers, loud enough for everyone to hear, sharp, aggressive, unapologetic. It wasn't the words themselves that mattered. It was the confidence behind them, the pride. Judge later described the moment not as anger, but clarity. A sudden, uncomfortable thought forming in real time. People like this were multiplying. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't correcting themselves. They were teaching. Right there, between plastic railings and animatronic music, the premise locked into place. Not a future ruled by evil, not a collapse caused by war, just a slow dilution. A world where intelligence doesn't disappear overnight. It simply gets outnumbered. When Judge left the park that day, he wasn't thinking about jokes. He wasn't thinking about box office numbers. He was thinking about inheritance, not money, not land, behavior, and how quietly it spreads. Number 1. It was never meant to be called Idiocracy. The title most people know wasn't the first choice. Not even close. Mike Judge originally wanted something uglier, something that sounded wrong the moment you said it out loud. A title that slurred its own words. A joke that insulted the country before the movie even began. The studio hated it. Not disliked, hated. Executives said it was too aggressive, too embarrassing, too direct. They worried audiences would feel attacked. They worried advertisers would pull back. They worried most of all that the film would sound un-American. So the arguments began. Weeks of back and forth, tone meetings, marketing fears. Eventually, a compromise emerged. A safer word. Shorter, cleaner. Idiocracy. Even then, discomfort lingered. Some executives refused to say the title out loud. Others quietly pushed to minimize its exposure. The insult didn't disappear. It just got softer packaging. And sometimes, that makes it worse. Number 2, the studio didn't just doubt the film. They tried to erase it. When the movie was finished, something strange happened. There was no celebration, no rollout plan, no confidence. Instead, there was silence. No trailers, no posters, no press tour. Some theaters weren't even told the movie's real name. They listed it as an untitled project. The release window lasted barely a week. Actors didn't attend premieres because there were none. Some cast members found out the film had been released after it was already gone. This wasn't a mistake, it was a decision. The message from the studio was simple. If we don't acknowledge it, maybe no one else will. But movies don't always obey orders. The film leaked. Word spread. Quietly, illegally, persistently. What the studio tried to bury didn't die. It just waited. Number 3. Even during production, the system was already breaking. Before the release collapse, the cracks appeared on set. The budget began shrinking without warning. Shoot days were cut. Locations were swapped overnight. Entire setups were abandoned mid-plan. At one point, they couldn't afford to remove brand logos digitally, so they blurred them instead. A future drowning in corporations, censored by budget limitations. Then came the worst part. Crew members were told their pay might be delayed. Some were never paid in full. Makeup artists, lighting technicians, set dressers. The explanation was vague. cash flow issues, temporary problems. But the irony was brutal. A film about a broken system was being crushed by one, and the people holding it together were the first to feel it. Through all of this, Judge kept directing, kept smiling, kept moving forward, because stopping meant the film would vanish completely, and finishing it was the only way it might survive. Number 4. While the film was being abandoned, life was moving forward. For the studio, the movie was becoming a liability. For the people inside it, life didn't pause. One of the film's central performers was Maya Rudolph. On screen, she played a woman navigating a future built on stupidity and decay. Off-screen, she was stepping into something far more real. In 2005, months before the film quietly disappeared from theaters, Rudolph gave birth to her first child. While Idiocracy was being ignored, undermarketed, and quietly shelved, she was learning how to care for a newborn. The contrast was almost cruel. A film imagining a world collapsing under bad decisions, and a woman beginning the most important responsibility of her life. One future was treated as disposable, the other demanded full attention. Years later, the irony would feel heavier. A movie warning about neglect, released into neglect. Number 5. President Camacho wasn't written. He was unleashed. Nothing about President Camacho was subtle. The muscles, the yelling, the gunfire, the chaos. But most of it wasn't on the page. Mike Judge gave a loose framework, then stepped back. What followed came from Terry Crews himself. The voice was improvised. The screaming wasn't scripted. Even the energy shifted between takes because Crews refused to repeat himself. What could have been a flat caricature became something strangely magnetic, not because it was realistic, but because it felt familiar. Camacho wasn't just loud. He was confident, decisive, certain, even when wrong. That's what made him unsettling. The performance didn't mock power. It exposed how easily spectacle replaces competence. Number 6. He almost never got the role. Despite how inseparable the role feels now, Terry Crews nearly didn't make it into the film at all. He auditioned once, then again, 5 times. Behind closed doors, executives wanted bigger names, safer faces, actors who felt more bankable. Crews wasn't famous enough yet, not proven enough. Too much of a risk for a film already making people nervous. By the final audition, he was exhausted, frustrated, certain he was about to be replaced. So he stopped trying to please anyone. He looked at the room and said, "If you find someone better, give it to them." Then he let everything go. The volume, the absurdity, the raw confidence. There was no alternative after that. He didn't just win the role, he defined it. And in doing so, he gave the film one of its most enduring, uncomfortable mirrors. Number 7. Playing dumb had limits. The instruction given to background actors was simple. Be stupid, exaggerated, cartoonish. At first, it worked. People slouched, mumbled, moved like their brains were buffering. But then something strange happened. A few extras went further than expected. Not funny further, uncomfortable further. Improvised gestures crossed into cruelty. Some jokes weren't absurd anymore. They were mean. Judge stopped takes. Not because it wasn't dumb enough, but because it was too real. The goal was never hatred. It was erosion. A future where intelligence faded away, not one where decency vanished completely. Ironically, the most disturbing moments on set didn't come from the script. They came from people being told there were no rules, and showing exactly where they would go. Number 8. Civilization didn't end with war. It ended with trash. There are no nuclear explosions in Idiocracy, no alien invasions, no apocalyptic battle. The world collapses under something far more boring. Garbage. Mountains of it, endless waste piling up until it literally caves in on itself. The joke landed because it wasn't invented. It was borrowed. Real headlines about landfills, real concerns about consumption, real warnings that no one wanted to slow down for. Judge didn't imagine humanity being wiped out. He imagined it being buried, not by enemies, by convenience. A future destroyed not by malice, but by laziness. Number 9. The dumbest costume choice became a prediction. The art department needed shoes that looked ridiculous, something no one would ever take seriously. They found plastic clogs, bright colors, cheap material, utterly uncool. Perfect. At the time, they were obscure, barely sold. A visual joke meant to signal a future with no taste left. No one thought they would escape the frame. Then the movie faded, and the shoes didn't. What started as set dressing became mainstream, then fashionable, then unavoidable. The joke walked straight out of the film and into real life, and by the time anyone noticed, it wasn't funny anymore. Number 10. The future changed everything, except the news. Logos evolved, language collapsed, corporations swallowed daily life. But in the middle of Idiocracy's future, one thing remained eerily untouched: Fox News. Same colors, same aggressive graphics, same frantic energy. The joke wasn't exaggeration. That was the point. According to people close to the production, it wasn't meant as a direct attack at first. It was a placeholder, a familiar symbol to ground the chaos. But the more the team looked at it, the less rewriting it needed. In a world where complexity had vanished and volume replaced thought, the network already fit perfectly. Everything else had to be redesigned to look stupid. That didn't. Number 11. The dumbest show in the world stopped feeling like a joke. When Mike Judge came up with "Ow my balls," it was meant to be the final punchline. No plot, no dialogue, just a man getting hit in the crotch. Over, and over, and over again. The audience in the film roared with laughter, because it was supposed to be impossible. The lowest imaginable form of entertainment. Then reality caught up. Fail compilations, pain-based humor, viral clips built on humiliation. What once felt absurd started to look familiar. The satire didn't age. It blended in. And when a joke becomes indistinguishable from real programming, the laughter changes tone. Number 12. Corporate satire worked. Because no one felt singled out. The film mocked everyone: fast food chains, retail giants, media companies, bureaucracy itself. On paper, that should have triggered lawsuits. It didn't. Studio lawyers found a strange loophole. If every corporation was ridiculed equally, no single brand could claim unfair treatment. So the solution wasn't restraint. It was escalation. More logos, bigger jokes, louder branding. Corporations laughed it off. Some thought it would never be released. Others didn't think anyone would care. Years later, when those jokes started looking less exaggerated, the laughter faded. Satire works best when people believe it can't happen to them. Number 13. The film became its own punchline. The movie mocked a world where intelligence didn't sell, where spectacle crushed substance, where thoughtful work was buried under noise. Then the same thing happened to it. The release was quiet. Theaters barely advertised it. Some audiences never even knew it existed. When the box office numbers came in, they were almost insulting. A film about cultural collapse failed because no one wanted to engage with it. There was no victory lap, no redemption arc. The satire didn't just predict the future, it reenacted it. A warning ignored because it wasn't entertaining enough. Number 14. At some point, it stopped being a comedy. For years, people laughed at the movie's exaggerations, the absurd politics, the corporate overload, the applause for stupidity. Then something shifted. Interviews changed tone. Jokes landed differently. The creator stopped calling it satire, stopped framing it as exaggeration. Not because the film had changed, but because the world had. Social media rewarded noise. Public figures leaned into performance. Attention mattered more than accuracy. What once felt cartoonish began to feel familiar. The laughter didn't disappear. It just got quieter and more uneasy. Number 15. The future wasn't invented. It was observed. The most unsettling part of the film was never its imagination. It was its restraint. No complex predictions. No advanced technology, no grand conspiracy, just one idea. What happens when responsibility stops being attractive? When thoughtfulness feels slow? When volume becomes more efficient than reason? The film didn't answer those questions. It didn't need to. Reality did that on its own, and that's why the movie refuses to stay in the past. Not because it was right about everything, but because it was honest about where things were already heading. Final section, what it leaves behind. At the end of the film, nothing is really fixed. Problems are postponed. Systems remain broken. The future looks slightly better, but never safe. That's the part most people miss. There is no grand solution in this story. No return to intelligence. No heroic reset. Just a pause. Because the point was never to scare people into panic. It was to show how easily things slide when no one resists. The world in the film doesn't collapse because of villains. It collapses because effort becomes inconvenient, because thinking feels optional, because responsibility loses its appeal. And that's why the movie still lingers. Not as a prediction, not as a joke, but as a quiet record of what happens when attention drifts. You don't need to agree with it. You don't even need to like it. You just have to notice how often it stops feeling exaggerated. The detail most people never notice. In the opening montage, generations blur together. Family trees tangle. Faces repeat. Logic dissolves. Hidden in that chaos is a subtle message. The future didn't arrive suddenly. It was inherited, not through disaster, through habits, through what was tolerated, through what was laughed off, through what felt harmless at the time. That's the real discomfort the film leaves behind. Not the idea that society will become stupid, but the realization that no one ever plans for it to happen. It just happens. The film was buried, ignored, misunderstood, and somehow it survived long enough to feel familiar. That may be its darkest achievement. Not that it predicted the world, but that the world eventually stopped arguing with it. And once that happens, the joke is already over.